Russia is the world's fourth largest emitter of carbon dioxide, yet many activists say the Russian authorities have yet to take global warming seriously. Vladimir Putin did not attend the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, and aside from vowing to tackle deforestation, the Kremlin did not sign on to some of the summit's biggest pledges. Well, for more on this, Vladimir Slivyak joins me for perspective. He's a Russian climate activist who was recently awarded what's known as the Alternative Nobel Prize, or the Right Livelihood Award, for his grassroots work fighting the coal and nuclear industries in Russia. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Vladimir.
Good morning.
In the past, Vladimir Putin has largely been seen as a climate change skeptic. He's questioned the role that people play in altering global temperatures, but it seems that there has been some change over the past few years. Recently, Russia announced plans to push Russia towards carbon neutrality by 2060, and he did sign on to the deforestation pledge at COP26. What do you think explains the shift, and is there anything to be optimistic about in terms of Russia addressing climate change?
Well, it's true that this year Russian rhetoric changed pretty much about climate change, and the Russian government started to produce at least some climate policy. Until this year, there was basically nothing. But when we look into what kind of initiatives there are under development by Russian government, we can see that over 90% of those initiatives are pretty much wrong. It wouldn't really bring any kind of result for climate. Like instead of looking at how to reduce emission of greenhouse gases in Russia, Russian government is basically trying to find some approach that will allow them to continue mining coal, oil, and gas and export it for money, and not really reducing anything, but just like recounting how much forests would absorb. So I think Russia still has a really long way to go to a good climate policy. And right now we cannot really say that Russia is on the right track.
And Vladimir, Putin's absence at the COP26 summit was pretty noteworthy, given that, as I've mentioned, Russia is one of the world's biggest CO2 emitters. It refused also to sign pledges to cut methane emissions by 2030 and to phase out coal. I want to ask, if major contributors to climate change like Russia don't join such important pledges, do you think that it's realistic to expect any significant change from other major polluters?
I think it depends pretty much on a foreign influence. Russia itself wouldn't do anything like this. Russia is pretty much dependent on a fossil fuel, and there are no signs so far that Russian government is going to phase out fossil fuel anytime in the future. But at the same time, Russia is vulnerable to foreign influence. If the countries around Russia are going to a carbon neutral society, Russia would have to join one way or another. Because, if anybody else, if no one else is buying your fossil fuel, then who would you export it? You would have to actually transform your economy. There is no other way.
Well, speaking of that, do you think that Russia does have a long-term plan for transitioning away from reliance on fossil fuels?
No, so far it's not the case. This is what we've been calling on and asking Russian government for quite a long time to think about this, to start prepare for a carbon neutral future, as many world leading countries already announced the dates when they will become a neutral. Well, Russia this year also announced the date, but most of the experts I was talking about are not actually sure how serious this goal about becoming carbon neutral in 2060 is, because we cannot see any kind of strategies behind this goal. It's absolutely not clear how Russia is going to achieve this goal. I think, unfortunately, it's very likely that there is no strategy behind this announcement about 2060 carbon neutrality.
In terms of what might be behind that strategy, Vladimir, it appears that, not only is Russia highly reliant on fossil fuels, but also that some of the country's major energy moguls are close to Vladimir Putin himself. Do you think that that makes the Russian president essentially dependent on the hydrocarbon lobby via some of his allies?
Well, I think, of course, it's very important. Basically, every big fossil fuel company in the country, that would be either friends of Vladimir Putin or friends of Vladimir Putin. So, of course, none of these people, oligarchs, as we call them, none of them really looking to phase out fossil fuel. And all of them, and the Russian government, unfortunately, until today, they are just looking for basically continuation of a situation when they extract as much of a fossil fuel as possible and export as much as possible for as long as possible. And I think this is really a way to disaster, and Russia really need to change its policy and start to prepare for real climate action.
And it, of course, Vladimir, allows those individuals to remain wealthy. I want to change gears now. Putin's climate envoy earlier this year said that the Kremlin wants nuclear power, which, if I'm not mistaken, accounts for 20% of Russia's electricity, to be recognized as clean energy. Those supporters say that it's a good alternative. Critics say that it may not be the case. I know that you've spent a lot of time warning about the dangers of nuclear energy. Could you please go into some detail about why it's not a sustainable solution to climate change in your view?
Well, my country had a very bad experience, historic experience with nuclear power. We had the largest, before Chernobyl, we had the largest nuclear accident in the world. In 1957, there was explosion in a nuclear waste facility in the Ural region of Russia. Then in 1986, in the Soviet Union, there was the largest nuclear catastrophe of humankind, which was an explosion at Chernobyl nuclear power plant. We all remember not so long ago, the Fukushima was not in Russia, but still another huge nuclear accident that happened. But when it comes to climate, first of all, there is now endless money and endless time that we can spend on different climate solutions. We need to look for a solution that work relatively fast, as the science tells us that by the mid-century we should become carbon neutral to avoid the most catastrophic consequences of climate change. And the problem with nuclear power that it is too slow. From the moment when you start planning nuclear reactor until the moment it starts producing electricity, it could be 20 years or even more than 20 years. And we need the result for climate much faster than this. And then nuclear power, as I said already, very dangerous. And it's also very expensive while delivering very small result. So why would anyone decide to use nuclear for climate action if it's too slow, too dangerous, and too expensive? I think it's not about climate action. It's about something else.
Okay,
In case
Vladimir,
of the Kremlin, it's about yeah.
I'm so sorry to have to stop you there. We're running out of time. I would have loved to talk to you about your activism and how hard that is, I imagine, amid the crackdown in Russia. But unfortunately, we have to keep it there. There's no more time. But thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Thank you very much.
It is about 8:47 in the morning here in Paris. Now for a quick reminder of our top headline.